Captain off the Colary research vessel, Serenity's hope was having another boring day in deep space. His crew had been mapping empty star systems for 3 months now, and honestly, he was getting tired of staring at nothing but rocks and gas clouds. The Colary Federation paid well for exploration work, but some days he wondered if retirement on his homeworld's sunny beaches might be better than floating around in the dark corners of space. That's when the signal hit their communications. A ray like a lightning bolt, the transmission was weak, crackling with static, but the desperation in the voice cut through all the electronic noise. It wasn't like the usual automated distress beacons they sometimes picked up from crashed cargo ships or broken mining stations. This was different. This was raw, human emotion bleeding through space itself. This is Earth. We are under attack. Civilian populations at risk. Please, anyone, help us. The voice belonged to someone who called himself Commander Jin Park. He spoke in heavily accented Galactic Standard, like someone who had learned the language from old textbooks rather than proper training. The words came fast, urgent, almost tripping over each other in their rush to get the message out. Soul Force, calling any friendly vessels. We have incoming hostiles, massive fleet, civilian evacuation in progress. Need immediate assistance. Please respond if anyone can hear this. Veltar's communications officer, young Kethra, looked up from her station with wide eyes. Her tentacles were twitching with nervous energy, which always happened when she got excited or scared. Captain, this signal is coming from way out in the Rim territories. According to our charts, there's no registered civilization in that sector. Captain moved closer to the communications console, studying the readouts. The signal was definitely coming from an uncharted system, somewhere past the edge of known space. But what really caught his attention wasn't where it came from, but how it sounded. This Jin Park person wasn't asking for rescue from pirates or requesting medical supplies. He was reporting a full-scale military attack on what sounded like their entire world. Captain Kett continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, the background noise in this transmission. Those are weapon discharges, heavy ones. This isn't some minor skirmish. Captain made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life, though he didn't know it yet. Federation protocol was clear about first contact situations. Any signal from an unknown species had to go through proper channels, be analyzed by experts, and approved by committees. The process usually took weeks, sometimes months, but something about the desperation in Commander Jin Park's voice made all those regulations seem stupid and pointless. These people, whoever they were, needed help right now, not next month after. Some bureaucrat, in a comfortable office, decided their request was worth considering. Keth forwarded this transmission to Federation Command immediately. Mark it as urgent priority. But Captain, the first contact protocols. Mark it urgent, Captain. Repeated firmly. Someone's dying out there. As the distress call began its journey through the galaxy's massive bureaucratic machine, none of them realized they had just received humanity's introduction to galactic civilization. And what an introduction it would prove to be. The Galactic. Council chambers looked exactly like what you'd expect from a committee that had been arguing about the same problems for the last 1,000 years. Massive curved walls rose up toward a domed ceiling that displayed a holographic map of known space, with thousands of little dots representing member worlds. The air smelled like a mixture of different atmospheric preferences, a bit too much. Sulfur from the Varaxian delegation, too much moisture from the aquatic Colary, and that weird metallic scent that always followed the crystalline Nexari around. Ambassador Kethril stood at the central podium, holding a datapad that contained humanity's desperate cry for help. Around him, representatives from dozens of species were doing what they did best, talking, arguing, and generally ignoring anything that might require actual work. The Zephyrian delegation was complaining about trade route disputes. The Varaxians were demanding increased military funding for their border patrols. The Kalari representatives were pushing for new environmental protection laws. It was just another typical day of galactic politics, where the biggest crisis was usually someone's hurt feelings about seating arrangements. Order, order, called the council speaker. A elderly Nexari, whose crystalline body chimed softly when he moved. "Ambassador Kethrel has a matter to present." The chamber didn't exactly fall silent, but the noise level dropped from a roar to a loud murmur. Kethrel cleared his throat and activated the holographic display above the podium. The desperate voice of Commander Jin Park echoed through the chambers, pleading for help from anyone who could hear. Most of the representatives barely looked up from their own conversations. Distress calls from unknown species weren't exactly rare. The galaxy was full of primitive worlds that got themselves into trouble with pirates, natural disasters, or their own stupid wars. The Council received maybe a dozen similar calls every month. Counselor Vrexani, a large reptilian creature who had been in galactic politics longer than some species had been spacefaring, waved a dismissive claw. Another backwater world in trouble. The Sol system isn't even properly surveyed. It's probably some raiders picking on a defenseless colony, or maybe their star is going unstable. It's nothing we haven't seen 1,000 times before. Several other representatives nodded in agreement. The Draxi ambassador was already checking his personal messages. The Kaleri delegation looked like they were planning their lunch orders. But Ambassador Zilmoth, of the Zephyrians, leaned forward in his seat, his feathered crest rising with interest. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced sensor technology and their obsessive attention to detail. If anyone would notice something unusual, it would be them. "Wait," Zilmoth said, his voice cutting through the general chatter. "Play that transmission again. Focus on the background." Audio. The chamber fell quiet as Jin Park's voice echoed again. This time, everyone could hear what the Zephyrian had noticed: the deep, rolling thunder of massive weapon discharges, the screaming whine of energy shields under impossible stress, the distinctive crack of hull metal being torn apart. Zilmoth's feathers flattened against his skull, which in Zephyrian body language meant serious concern. Those energy signatures. I've been analyzing weapons data for 40 years, and I've never seen discharge patterns like this. These readings don't match anything in our military databases. A few representatives actually looked up from their personal business, but not many. The galaxy was full of unknown weapons. Pirates were always cobbling together new guns from stolen technology. Some species got creative when they were desperate. After exactly 12 minutes of half-hearted debate, which was actually longer than usual for these situations, the Council reached their decision. They would send a standard relief flotilla to investigate. 3 ships, nothing more. Basic medical supplies, some emergency rations, maybe a small security detail if things looked dangerous. "It's probably over by now anyway," Counselor Vrexani muttered as he voted. "These primitive species either win fast or die fast. Either way, 3 ships will be more than enough to clean up whatever's left." The decision was officially logged in the Council records at 1547, Galactic Standard Time. By 1630, most of the representatives had forgotten about it entirely. None of them realized they had just made the most catastrophically wrong assessment in galactic history. Commander Rothfull had been leading relief missions for 15 years. He thought he had seen everything the galaxy could throw at him. Plague outbreaks, pirate raids, natural disasters, civil wars. He'd helped clean up the mess after all of them. But as his 3-ship flotilla dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, he realized he had never seen anything like this. The first thing that hit him was the sheer scale of the debris field. It stretched across space like a metallic asteroid belt, chunks of twisted metal and shattered hull plating drifting in lazy orbits around the system's star. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Yexta, was staring at her displays with her mouth hanging open. "Commander," she whispered, "my sensors are showing debris from at least 300 vessels. Maybe more. The field is so dense, I can't get accurate readings." Rothfell felt his stomach drop. 300 ships meant this wasn't some minor skirmish with pirates or raiders. This was the aftermath of a major fleet engagement, the kind of battle that usually left entire star systems uninhabitable for decades. But that wasn't the strangest part. His science officer, Dr. Kolmesh, was running detailed scans on the wreckage. "Commander, these hull fragments are not from any known species in our databases. The metal composition is completely alien, and the weapon scoring patterns suggest energy weapons far beyond current galactic technology. What about the defenders? Rothfull asked, dreading the answer. Usually when they arrived at disaster sites like this, they found either empty space or the scattered remains of whoever had tried to fight back. That's just it, sir, Yexter replied, her voice filled with confusion. There are ships moving in the inner system, lots of them, and they're functioning normally, running standard patrol patterns around that blue-green world. Before Rothfull could process this impossible information, his communications officer signaled an incoming transmission. The voice that came through was calm, professional, and speaking perfect galactic standard with just a hint of an accent. He couldn't identify. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Han Kim of the Seoul Defense Force. Welcome to our system. How can we help you today? Rothfull stared at his crew, all of whom looked just as confused as he felt. The voice sounded like someone greeting visitors at a peaceful trade station, not survivors of what appeared to be the largest space battle in recorded history. This is Commander Rothfull of the Galactic Council Relief Force, he managed to stammer. We received your distress call 3 days ago. We're here to provide emergency assistance. There was a brief pause, and Rothfull could hear voices talking in the background, people discussing something in a language his translators couldn't quite handle. Distress call? Captain Kim asked, and now he sounded genuinely puzzled. You mean the Devourer situation? Yeah, we handled that 3 days ago. It took a bit of doing, but we got it sorted out. Thanks for making the trip, though. That's really thoughtful of you. Dr. Kolmesh was frantically checking his sensor readings. Commander, he whispered, I'm detecting Devourer technology signatures in this debris field, but that's impossible. Devourers haven't been seen in this sector for over 50 years. Rothfull looked at his tactical display, which was still trying to calculate the exact number of destroyed vessels. The computer kept revising its estimates upward. 400 ships. 500. The numbers just kept climbing. Captain Kim, he said carefully, exactly what happened here 3 days ago. Well, came the cheerful reply. We had some uninvited guests show up. Big fleet. Maybe 200 ships. They seemed pretty hostile, so we activated emergency protocols and dealt with the situation. Sorry about all the debris. Cleanup crews are still working on clearing the shipping lanes. Rothfull stared at the massive graveyard of alien warships floating around him and wondered if he was losing his mind. Dr. Nathara had studied alien technology for most of her adult life. She had examined wreckage from 1,000 different species, analyzed weapon signatures from every known military force in the galaxy, and written 3 textbooks on xenobiology. But as she stared at the debris patterns floating past their ship, her hands started shaking. Commander, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, these are Devourer ships, hundreds of them. The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that happens when everyone in the room realizes they're looking at something that shouldn't exist. Lieutenant Yexta dropped her datapad. Dr. Kolmesh actually took a step backward from his console, as if the readings themselves might be dangerous. Commander Rothfull felt his blood turn to ice water. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Devourers, even if most people tried not to think about them. They were the nightmare species, the ones parents used to scare children into behaving. A nomadic fleet that moved from system to system. Consuming everything in their path, the Devourers didn't just conquer worlds, they ate them. Literally. Their massive bioships would strip mine entire planets, harvest every living thing, and leave behind nothing but dead rocks floating in space. 17 different civilizations had been completely wiped out over the past 1,000 years. Entire species that had thrived for millennia were now just footnotes in galactic history books. 2 years ago, when the Devourers had attacked the Kepler colonies, it had taken the combined military might of 4 major star nations just to drive them off. Not defeat them, just convince them to go somewhere else. The battle had lasted 6 months and cost over 1 million lives. The debris from that fight was still being cleared, and 3 worlds were permanently uninhabitable. And now, Dr. Nathara was telling him that this unknown human species had faced them alone. Captain Kim's voice came through the cum again, still sounding like he was discussing the weather. Yeah, they showed up 3 days ago. Big fleet, maybe 200 ships. Our early warning systems gave us about 13 minutes notice before they dropped out of hyperspace. Rothfel's voice cracked like he was going through puberty again. How did you possibly prepare for an attack in 13 minutes? Well, Kim admitted, and Rothfel could almost hear him shrugging. It was touch and go for a while there. We activated something called Final Protocol, which basically means everyone with a gun shows up to help. Once the home fleet converged, on Earth, we managed to work things out. The Devourers were pretty stubborn, though. Took us almost 6 hours to finish mopping them up. Dr. Nathara was frantically recounting the debris pieces floating past their viewports. Her computer kept revising the numbers upward. 300 Devourer ships. 400. 500 the Devourers had brought their largest invasion. Fleet in recorded history, and these humans had turned it into scrap metal in 6 hours. Captain Kim, Dr. Kolmesh asked weakly, what exactly is your final protocol? Oh, that's just our emergency defense plan. When someone threatens Earth, every military ship, armed civilian vessel, orbital defense platform, converted mining rig, even some of the cargo haulers with improvised weapons. Basically, everyone shows up to help out. Standard procedure, really. The Galactic officers sat in their command chairs, staring at displays showing the graveyard of the most feared military force in known space, listening to humans describe genocide-level warfare like it was a neighborhood block party. Sorry about all the debris, Kim added cheerfully. Cleanup crews are working around the clock, but there's a lot of it. Should have the shipping lanes clear by next week. Admiral Bo Lee stepped aboard the Galactic Council relief ship with the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from someone who just finished a successful day at the office. She was a small woman, maybe 5.5 feet tall, wearing a simple, blue uniform that looked more like a maintenance worker's outfit than military dress. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a steaming cup of something that smelled like burned plant matter. Commander Rothfel and his crew had been expecting someone intimidating, a towering warrior covered in battle scars, maybe. Or at least someone who looked like they had just survived the largest space battle in galactic history. Instead, they got what appeared to be someone's friendly aunt who worked in an office somewhere. Thanks for having me aboard, Admiral Lee said cheerfully, settling into the conference room chair they'd offered her. Hope you don't mind if I drink my coffee during this. It's been a long couple of days. Dr. Nathara was staring at her with the kind of fascination usually reserved for dangerous animals in zoos. Admiral, could you walk us through what happened 3 days ago? Sure thing, Lee replied, pulling out a small tablet. Let's see. The Devourers dropped out of hyperspace at 1427 local Earth time. Our deep space tracking stations picked them up about 13 minutes before they arrived in system. Standard procedure kicked in immediately. Standard procedure? Lieutenant Yexta asked weakly. Final protocol, Lee explained, like she was describing how to make a sandwich. It's our emergency defense measure. When Earth is threatened, every available vessel converges on the home system. Military ships, of course, but also armed civilian vessels, orbital defense platforms, converted mining rigs, cargo haulers with improvised weapons, even some of the tourist ships that carry defensive systems. Commander Rothfel felt his throat go dry. That sounds like ... a lot of ships. Well, Earth's a busy place, Lee said with a shrug. Lots of traffic coming and going. Plus we've got the local defense grid, the system patrol units, the merchant, Marine reserves, the civilian volunteer corps. When you add it all up, it comes to a decent-sized response force. Dr. Kolmesh was frantically taking notes, trying to understand what he was hearing. Admiral, the fleet that destroyed the Devourers. That was your entire military force? Admiral Lee nearly choked on her coffee. Oh goodness, no. That was just Earth's local defense force. You know, the ships that happened to be in system or could get here quickly. The alien officers exchanged glances that could only be described as pure, undiluted terror. The real fleet was conducting training exercises near Alpha Centauri. Lee continued casually. They didn't even need to break off their maneuvers. We sent them a message saying we had things handled, and they just continued with their scheduled activities. Dr. Nathara's voice came out as barely a whisper. How many ships are in your real fleet? Admiral Lee paused, considering the question, like someone trying to remember how many cars were parked in their neighborhood. You know, I'd have to check with Fleet Command for exact numbers. We've got ships spread across a lot of systems these days, but I'd guess, maybe 30 or 40 times what you saw here. The room fell completely silent except for the soft humming of the ship's life support systems and the sound of Admiral Lee sipping her coffee. The emergency meeting at Galactic Intelligence Command looked like a scene from a disaster movie. Analysts, who normally spent their days filing routine reports, were running between workstations with armloads of data tablets, their faces pale with exhaustion and terror. Coffee cups and energy drinks littered every available surface, and the air recycling system was working overtime to clear the smell of stress sweat from 24 different species. Director Zex Kari of Galactic Intelligence had been in the spy business for 40 years, and he had never seen his people this panicked. Not during the Vracian Civil War, not during the Nebula Crisis, not even during the original Devourer attacks 50 years ago. But in the 18 hours since Admiral Lee's debriefing had been transmitted back to Galactic Command, every intelligence agency in known space had gone into full crisis mode. "What do we have?" Zexkari demanded as he burst into the main analysis center. Senior Analyst Velinara looked up from her workstation with bloodshot eyes. "Director, we've been monitoring human communication channels since yesterday. Finding ... It doesn't make sense." She activated the holographic display above her desk, showing dozens of intercepted transmissions scrolling past in real time. "Look at these references. Colonial defense networks. That's not just Earth. That implies multiple colony worlds with their own military forces. Deep space patrol groups, those are long-range fleets operating in sectors we didn't even know." Humans had reached. Another analyst, Dr. Cothran, rushed over with a tablet clutched in his tentacles. "Director, we found something called Rim Fleet Command, based on the communication protocols. This appears to be a separate military organization that operates exclusively in the Outer Rim territories. How many ships are we talking about?" Zexkari asked, though he was starting to dread the answer. "We don't know," Velinara replied helplessly. "The humans use codenames and abbreviated references for everything. But based on supply requisitions we've intercepted, we're talking about fleets that require industrial-scale logistical support." The real breakthrough came when junior analyst Tixara stumbled across a routine military communication that had been transmitted in clear language. "Director, you need to hear this," she called out, her voice cracking with stress. The recording that played through the speakers was casual, almost boring, just two human officers discussing recent events. But the words made everyone in the room feel sick. "Earth's defense went well," said a voice identified as General Yu Choi of something called Terran Military Command. "Good thing it was just 200 Devourer ships. If they'd brought a real fleet, we might have had to wake up Second Fleet." The room fell completely silent. Second Fleet. Not just another fleet. A Second Fleet, implying there was at least a First Fleet, possibly others. "There's more," Velinara whispered, activating another display. "We found references to Third Fleet, Fourth Fleet, Expeditionary Forces, Strategic Reserve Commands, and something called Home Fleet that everyone talks about like it's in a completely different category from everything else." Within hours, emergency sessions were being called in every major galactic capital. Defense ministers who had been comfortable with their military budgets for decades suddenly found themselves staring at projections that kept them awake at night. The Kalari Federation tripled their military spending overnight. The Varaxian Republic activated reserve fleets that hadn't been used in 50 years. The Zephyrian Empire, known throughout the galaxy for their cautious approach to everything immediately, began negotiations for a non-aggression pact with humanity. Even though they had no idea how to contact them officially, because the terrifying truth was becoming clear. Humanity had been operating what appeared to be the largest military force in galactic history, right under everyone's noses. For who knows how long? And nobody had noticed. The diplomatic quarter of Nexus Prime, galaxy's main trading hub, had never seen anything like it. Within 48 hours of Admiral Lee's debriefing reaching the major galactic powers, every single embassy was working around the clock to establish contact with humanity. Ships that normally carried trade goods were hastily converted into diplomatic vessels. Ambassadors, who had been enjoying peaceful retirements, were dragged back into service. The normally quiet halls of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps looked like an anthill that someone had kicked. The Kalari Federation was first to arrive. It's mainly because they had the fastest ships. Ambassador Valkyrie brought an entire cargo hold full of luxury goods, rare minerals, and exclusive trade agreements. The Zephyrian Empire showed up 6 hours later with a delegation so large they needed 3 ships to carry everyone. The Varaxian Republic, not to be outdone, arrived with what they called a cultural exchange package that included art, literature, and invitations to the finest universities in their space. But here's the thing. Nobody actually knew how to contact humanity officially. The humans had built what could generously be called an embassy station in neutral space. But it looked more like a converted cargo depot than a proper diplomatic facility. The whole structure had obviously been thrown together in about a week, complete with temporary walls and furniture that looked like it came from an office supply warehouse. Ambassador G. Park greeted each delegation with the same warm, confused smile that suggested she wasn't entirely sure why everyone was making such a big fuss. She was a middle-aged woman who dressed like a college professor and served tea that tasted like it came from a vending machine. Her embassy staff consisted of 3 junior diplomats who looked like they had been pulled away from more important jobs. The Kalari delegation arrived first, carrying cases full of precious metals and offering exclusive mining rights to 12 different star systems. Ambassador Park listened politely and nodded at appropriate intervals. "Trade agreements sound wonderful," she said, pouring another cup of terrible tea. "We're always happy to do business with friendly neighbors. I'll pass your offer along to the Commerce Department." Ambassador Valkyrie leaned forward eagerly. "What can humanity offer in return? Raw materials? Manufactured goods? Advanced technology?" Park considered this for a moment. "Well, we make pretty good coffee, and our shipyards are always busy, so I'm sure we could work something out." The Zephyrian delegation focused on military cooperation, which made sense since they were the most paranoid species in the galaxy. Their lead negotiator, Commander Zilrith, presented detailed proposals for joint fleet exercises, shared intelligence networks, and mutual defense treaties. "Military cooperation sounds lovely," Park replied with genuine enthusiasm. "We always appreciate neighbors who help keep things peaceful around here." "Perhaps we could discuss fleet capabilities," Zilrith suggested carefully. "For coordination purposes, of course." Park waved her hand vaguely. "Oh, we have enough ships to keep everyone safe. It's a few patrol groups here and there. Nothing too exciting. It's mostly we just make sure the shipping lanes stay clear and nobody causes trouble." The Varaxian Republic tried a different approach, focusing on cultural exchange and scientific cooperation. They offered access to their most advanced research facilities and invited human scientists to study at their most prestigious academies. "Education is always important," Park agreed, though she seemed more interested in the cookies the Varaxians had brought as a diplomatic gift. "We'll definitely want our people to learn more about galactic civilization." But every time any delegation tried to get specific information about human capabilities, territories, or military strength, Ambassador Park would give the same kind of friendly, vague answers that left everyone more confused than before. Each delegation left the makeshift embassy feeling like they had accomplished nothing except confirming that humanity was either the most brilliantly secretive species in the galaxy, or genuinely had no idea how terrifying they appeared to everyone. Else, the smart money was on both. The Nexus Prime system had never hosted anything like this before. For the first time in galactic history, every major civilization had sent their most important representatives to welcome a new species into the galactic community. The occasion was so significant that even the notoriously isolationist Draxi had shown up, along with species that hadn't spoken to each other in decades. The gathering itself was impressive, enough to make historians weep with joy. Hundreds of diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy had arranged themselves in a massive ceremonial formation around Nexus Prime's central space station. The Kalari Federation had brought their finest ceremonial cruisers, their hulls polished to mirror brightness. The Zephyrian Empire's ships gleamed with crystalline armor that reflected the system's twin stars. Even the mysterious Nexari had sent a delegation, their living ships pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of ancient wisdom. Everything was perfect. The diplomatic protocols had been rehearsed dozens of times. Translators had been briefed. On human linguistic patterns, cultural experts had prepared welcoming ceremonies that would hopefully not offend humanity's unknown customs. The galactic community was ready to properly welcome these remarkable humans who had somehow defeated the foe. Then space itself seemed to explode. It started as a ripple at the edge of the system, like someone dropping a stone into perfectly still water. The first sign was the sensor readings going completely insane, energy signatures that made no sense, gravitational distortions that shouldn't have been possible, and what could only be described as reality itself being twisted into new shapes. Admiral Kethful of the Kaleri Federation was the first to realize what was happening. All ships, we have massive hyperspace emergence signatures at the system perimeter. His voice crackled across the diplomatic channels. Something big is coming through. But big didn't even begin to describe what emerged. Thousands of ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, appearing in waves that seemed to go on forever. Massive dreadnoughts the size of small moons-led formations of cruisers and destroyers that stretched across entire sectors of space. Support vessels, carriers, mobile shipyards, and weapon platforms filled the gaps between the capital ships. Like schools of metallic fish, swimming through an ocean of stars. The human fleet was so large that it actually blocked out the light from several stars, casting shadows across 3 different planets in the Nexus Prime system. Ships kept appearing for almost 10 minutes, each wave bigger than the entire galactic diplomatic fleet combined. Then came the voice that broke the stunned silence. "Galactic Control, this is Admiral Taiwan of the 7th Fleet," came a cheerful, slightly embarrassed voice over the communication channels. "Sorry, we're late to the party. Navigation got a bit confused in that hyperspace storm near the Crab Nebula, and we took a wrong turn somewhere around the Horsehead. Hope we're not intruding on anything important." Director Velanash of Nexus Prime. Control tried to respond, but no words came out. His voice box had apparently forgotten how to work. The human flagship alone was larger than the combined diplomatic fleet of 37 civilizations. Its escort vessels could have conquered entire star systems. And this was just the 7th Fleet, implying there were at least 6 others somewhere else in the galaxy. Admiral Taiwan's voice came through again, still sounding apologetic. "Should we park somewhere out of the way? We don't want a crowd." "You're gathering the emergency session of the Galactic Council 3 days after the Nexus Prime gathering was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives who had spent centuries arguing about trade routes and border disputes were now sitting in stunned silence, trying to process the fact that everything they thought they knew about galactic politics had just become completely irrelevant. Sukong stood at the central podium where countless ambassadors had delivered speeches about territorial claims and economic agreements. But unlike those politicians, she wore a simple military uniform and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been protecting the galaxy without asking for thanks or recognition. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying easily through the massive chamber, "I know this has been a confusing few days for everyone. We probably should have introduced ourselves properly years ago, but to be honest, most of you seem to be getting along just fine without us." Council Speaker Zek Snari, whose crystalline body was vibrating with nervous energy, managed to find his voice. "Admiral Kang, how long has humanity been present in galactic space?" Kong considered this for a moment, like someone trying to remember when they had moved into the neighborhood. "Oh, about 60 years now. We started with just a few exploration ships, but you know how it is. One thing leads to another. Colonies get established, trade routes need protection, and before you know it, you're running regular patrols across half the galaxy." Dr. Veltara, from the Galactic Historical Institute, leaned forward. "Admiral, our records show no evidence of human presence in any of those sectors." "Well, we tried to keep a low profile," Kong replied with a slight smile. "Nobody likes the new neighbors who show up and immediately start telling everyone how to run their business. We figured it was better to just quietly help out where we could and let everyone get used to us gradually." The implications of this statement hit the council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been hiding. They had been actively protecting galactic civilization, while remaining completely invisible to the very people they were helping. Ambassador Yilkith of the Vroxian Republic asked the question everyone was thinking. What exactly does helping out where we could mean? Kong activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared in dozens of systems, each one representing what looked like a military incident. Pirate fleets that mysteriously disappeared before they could attack colonies. Rogue asteroids that got nudged away from inhabited worlds. Plague ships that never quite made it to their destinations. Aggressive expansion fleets that developed sudden mechanical problems and had to turn back. The red dots kept appearing until there were hundreds of them scattered across the galaxy. Each one represented a disaster that had been quietly prevented, a war that had been stopped before it started, or a catastrophe that had been averted by invisible guardians. We were in the neighborhood anyway, Kong said with a shrug. Seemed rude not to lend a hand. The age of galactic conquest ended not with massive battles or peace treaties, but with a simple announcement from Admiral Kong. Aggressive expansion would no longer be tolerated, but peaceful species would find humanity's protection freely given. The Vraxian Republic quietly shelved their plans to annex 3 neighboring systems. The militant faction of the Clary Federation suddenly discovered a passion for diplomatic solutions. Pirates across the galaxy began looking for new careers and legitimate shipping. The SOS that Captain Jin Park had sent from Earth wasn't really a call for help. It was humanity's polite way of announcing they were ready to stop being the galaxy's secret guardians and start being visible members of galactic civilization. And as Admiral Kong had put it with typical human understatement, we were in the neighborhood anyway.